The space around Earth was quiet and dark. Stars twinkled in the distance like tiny diamonds scattered across black cloth. But this peace would not last long. Something was coming from the outer edge of the solar system, something that had never been seen near Earth before. 12 alien ships moved through space like ghosts. They were beautiful in a strange way, with smooth curves and glowing lights that pulsed like heartbeats. These ships belonged to the Zephyrian race, beings who had traveled the galaxy for thousands of years. Their ships were grown rather than built, made from living materials that could heal themselves when damaged. Fleet Commander Vex High stood in the center of his flagship's bridge. He was tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin that changed color based on his mood. Right now his skin showed calm blue patterns, but there was a hint of yellow around the edges that meant he was slightly nervous. He had read all the reports about these humans, and everything suggested this would be an easy mission. The humans had only learned to travel faster than light 20 years ago. To the Zephyrians, who had been exploring space for millennia, 20 years was like a single day. These humans were babies taking their first steps, nothing more. The plan was simple: show up, display their superior technology, and convince the humans to join the Galactic Confederation as a minor member species. It had worked on hundreds of other worlds. Vexi looked at the data screen, showing the 3rd planet from the local star. Earth looked peaceful from this distance, mostly blue and green with white clouds swirling around it. According to their scouts, about 8 billion humans lived on that world. They were a young species, violent but not particularly dangerous to advanced civilizations. Their weapons were primitive, their ships were crude, and their understanding of the galaxy was limited. On Earth, Captain Jake Morrison was having his morning coffee on the bridge of the USS Defiant. The ship was huge by human standards, over a mile long and bristling with weapons. Morrison was 45 years old, with gray hair at his temples and scars on his hands from his early days as a fighter pilot. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion, the asteroid mining wars, and the first contact incident with the robot ships from Proxima Centauri. The Defiant was not like the elegant alien ships approaching the solar system, where alien vessels curved and flowed like living things. The Defiant was all straight lines and sharp angles. It looked like someone had taken a city-sized gun and added engines to it. The hull was covered in thick armor plating, and weapon ports dotted every surface. Even the crew quarters had emergency gun mounts built into the walls. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at the sensor station, her eyes focused on the screens in front of her. She was 28 years old, brilliant with electronics, and had grown up on the Luna colonies where everyone learned to read sensor data before they learned to read books. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls, fine-tuning the long-range scanners that watched the edges of the solar system. The first sign of trouble came at 0847 hours ship time. Rodriguez saw the energy signatures before she saw the ships themselves. 12 objects were moving toward the inner solar system at incredible speed, faster than anything humans had ever built. Their energy readings were unlike anything in the human databases. "Captain," Rodriguez called out, her voice steady despite the excitement she felt. "I'm reading multiple contacts on the outer perimeter. 12 objects, moving fast, definitely not human design." Morrison set down his coffee cup and walked over to her station. He had been expecting this day for years. Earth's radio signals had been traveling through space for over a century, and eventually, someone was going to notice them. The only question was whether those someones would be friendly or hostile. "How long until they reach Earth?" Morrison asked. Rodriguez ran quick calculations on her computer. "At their current speed, about 6 hours, sir." "But Captain, these energy readings are incredible. Each one of those ships is putting out more power than our largest space stations." Morrison nodded. This was exactly what Earth's military leaders had feared. Humanity had built the Defiant and her sister ships for one reason: When the aliens finally showed up, humans wanted to be ready for anything. The ship around them represented 20 years of human engineering, designed by people who had learned warfare in the harsh environments of space. Chief Engineer Tony Vasquez was in the engine room, 3 decks below the bridge. He was a big man with calloused hands and oil stains on his uniform. He had built engines for mining ships, cargo haulers, and military vessels, but nothing had prepared him for the Defiant's power systems. The ship's main reactors could power a small city, and every system was built with one goal in mind: keep fighting no matter what. The Defiant's weapons were not elegant like alien technology. They were brutal, efficient, and designed to destroy anything they were pointed at. 20 main plasma cannons lined the ship's hull, each one capable of melting through a mountain. 40 torpedo tubes held warheads that could crack asteroids in half. Point defense guns covered every inch of the ship's surface, ready to shoot down incoming missiles or small attack craft. Vasquez ran his daily checks on the weapon systems, not knowing that in a few hours every one of them would be needed. The plasma cannons hummed with barely contained energy, their magnetic bottles holding temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun. The torpedo tubes were loaded with the most destructive weapons humanity had ever created, warheads that combined nuclear fusion with antimatter triggers. Back on the Zephyrian flagship, Science Officer Carl Jan was studying the primitive human world through their advanced sensors. Carl Jan was younger than Vex High, with bright green skin that showed his enthusiasm for discovery. He had studied dozens of primitive species, and humans seemed to follow the same patterns as all the others. "Commander," Carl Jan reported, "the humans have several space stations around their world, and I'm detecting what appears to be a small fleet of spacecraft. Perhaps 50 vessels total, most of them clearly designed for cargo transport or short-range patrol duties." Vex High's skin showed satisfied orange patterns. 50 ships was more than most primitive species managed, but still nothing compared to the thousands of vessels in the Zephyrian fleet. The humans would see the overwhelming superiority of Confederation technology and submit peacefully. Just like the others, what neither Kaljan nor Vex High understood was that humans approach space differently than other species. Most races built ships to explore, to trade, to transport people and goods across the galaxy. They added weapons as an afterthought, just enough to defend against pirates or minor threats. Humans had looked at the vast emptiness of space and seen a battlefield. Every human ship was designed first as a weapon, then adapted for other purposes. Even their cargo vessels carried enough firepower to fight off a small fleet. It was not because humans were naturally warlike, though they certainly could be. It was because humans had learned a hard lesson in their short history. In a dangerous universe, the only way to protect what you love is to be more dangerous than anything that might threaten it. The Defiant was the ultimate expression of this philosophy. It was not just a warship, it was a statement. It said that humanity would not go quietly into the dark, would not submit to superior technology, and would fight with everything they had to protect their world and their people. As the alien fleet moved closer to Earth, neither side fully understood what was about to happen. The Zephyrians expected an easy victory through superior technology and intimidation. The humans expected a fight and had prepared accordingly. In 6 hours, both sides would learn something new about the universe. The Zephyrians would discover that some species refuse to be intimidated, no matter how advanced their opponents might be. And humanity would announce its arrival on the galactic stage in the most human way possible, with overwhelming firepower and absolute refusal to back down. The Zephyrian fleet moved deeper into the solar system, their bioships gliding through space with the grace of sea creatures swimming through dark water. Fleet Commander Vex High stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display show their approach to the human homeworld. Everything was going according to plan. Soon, they would demonstrate their superior technology, And these primitive humans would submit to Confederation authority. The 12 alien ships began to arrange themselves in what they called the intimidation formation. It was a pattern they had used successfully on 47 different worlds. The ships would spread out in a perfect circle, then pulse their bioluminescent hulls in synchronized patterns while broadcasting their demands. The display usually convinced primitive species to surrender without any violence. Vex High's skin showed confident purple patterns as he gave the order. Begin the intimidation protocol. Show these humans the power of the Confederation. The alien ships began to glow. Waves of blue and green light traveled along their hulls like living lightning. The effect was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Each ship pulsed in perfect timing with the others, creating a light show that could be seen from millions of miles away. Science Officer Carl Jan monitored the human responses to their display. Commander, I'm detecting increased communication traffic from the human ships. They appear to be coordinating some kind of response. Vexhai nodded. This was normal. Most species would panic when they saw Confederation technology for the first time. The humans were probably arguing among themselves about whether to fight or surrender. Soon, common sense would win, and they would submit peacefully. On the bridge of the USS Defiant, the crew watched the alien light show with professional interest. Captain Morrison had seen similar displays before, during the war with the Centauri robots. The aliens were trying to impress them, to make them afraid through a show of superior technology. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez tracked the alien ships on her sensors. Captain, they're moving into a circular formation around our position. Distance approximately 50,000 kilometers. They're maintaining that formation while broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Communications Officer Lisa Parker was a small woman with quick fingers and an ear for languages. She had grown up in the multicultural cities of New California, where speaking 5 languages was considered normal. Now she was working to decode the alien messages, running them through the ship's translation computers. Captain, I'm getting a translation of their broadcast, Parker reported. They're demanding our immediate surrender. They want us to power down our weapons and prepare to be boarded. They're also transmitting what appears to be a list of terms for our submission to something called the Galactic Confederation. Morrison read the translation on his command screen. The aliens wanted humanity to give up their weapons, accept Confederation oversight of their government, and agree to limits on their space exploration. In return, they would be allowed to exist as a minor member species under alien protection. What's our response, sir? Parker asked. Morrison looked around his bridge at the crew he had trained for 5 years. These were not people who would surrender easily. They had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never see Earth again. They had trained for combat in the dark emptiness between stars, practiced fighting against impossible odds, and sworn to protect humanity no matter the cost. Signal the fleet, Morrison ordered. All ships are to assume combat positions. Charge all weapons systems and prepare for battle. Chief Engineer Tony Vasquez received the order in his engine room deep in the ship's hull. Around him, massive machines hummed with barely contained power. The Defiant's fusion reactors were already running at full capacity, but combat operations would require even more energy. Vasquez began bringing the emergency power systems online, feeling the ship's deck vibrate under his feet as the engines spun up to war power. The Defiant was not alone in space. 4 other human warships had joined the formation: the USS Intrepid, the USS Resolute, the USS Relentless, and the USS Vengeance. Each ship was different in design, but all shared the same basic philosophy. They were built to fight, built to win, and built to keep fighting until nothing remained of their enemies. Navigator Chris Thompson plotted the ship's course as Morrison gave his orders. The captain wanted the Defiant to move into what appeared to be a defensive position, but Thompson knew better. He had studied human naval tactics going back centuries. The position Morrison was choosing would give them the best firing angles on the entire alien fleet. The alien ships continued their light show, expecting the humans to be impressed by their technological superiority. What they did not understand was that humans measured technology by its ability to destroy things, not by how pretty it looked. Lieutenant Commander Kevin Hayes oversaw the weapon systems as they came online. The ship's 20 plasma cannon began to charge, their magnetic containment fields humming with increasing power. The 40 torpedo tubes loaded their deadly cargo, warheads that combine nuclear fusion with antimatter triggers. Point defense. Guns swiveled to track the alien vessels, ready to shoot down any incoming attacks. The aliens had assumed humans would be like other primitive species they had encountered. Most young civilizations were impressed by superior technology and would submit to avoid destruction. The Zephyrians had peaceful intentions, but they were prepared to use force if necessary. Their bioships carried weapons that could destroy cities, and their shields could deflect most primitive attacks. What the aliens did not know was that humans had spent their entire history learning how to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and better armed than they were. Humans had started with sticks and stones, then moved to spears, bows, guns, tanks, aircraft, and nuclear weapons. Each generation had found new ways to overcome superior enemies through superior firepower. Commander Vex High watched his tactical display as the human ships began to move. The primitive vessels were taking what appeared to be defensive positions, exactly as predicted by Confederation military doctrine. The humans were obviously afraid and were trying to protect themselves. Kuljan, what are the power readings from the human ships? Vex High asked. The science officer checked his instruments, then checked them again. His skin began to show worried yellow patterns. Commander, I'm reading massive energy buildups from all 5 human vessels. Power output is climbing far beyond what our intelligence report suggested was possible. Vex High looked at the display more carefully. The human ships were ugly compared to Zephyrian bioships, but they were definitely putting out enormous amounts of energy. Perhaps their technology was more advanced than the scouts had reported. On the Defiant, Weapons Officer Danny Garcia announced that all systems were ready for combat. The ship's main plasma arrays were charged to full power, holding temperatures that could melt steel in microseconds. The torpedo tubes were loaded with humanity's most destructive weapons, each warhead capable of destroying a small moon. Captain Morrison studied the alien formation on his tactical display. The 12 ships had arranged themselves in a perfect circle, probably to maximize the visual impact of their light show. What they had actually done was create the perfect target for human weapons. Tactical assessment. Rodriguez, Morrison requested. Rodriguez ran the numbers through her combat computer. Sir, their formation is designed for intimidation, not for combat. They're positioned to look impressive, but they're actually quite vulnerable. Their ships are close enough together that area effect weapons could damage multiple targets. Morrison nodded. The aliens were making the same mistake that many enemies had made when fighting humans. They were assuming that superior technology would be enough to win. They had not considered that humans might have built their ships specifically to fight enemies with superior technology. The alien fleet continued their light show, waiting for the humans to surrender. The Zephyrians had used this tactic successfully on dozens of worlds, and they saw no reason why it would not work on the humans. They were about to learn why humanity had survived every challenge their dangerous planet had thrown at them. They were about to discover that some species do not submit to superior technology. Some species fight back with everything they have, and some species are very good at fighting. The moment of truth was coming. The Zephyrian fleet had completed their intimidation display, and now they waited for the human response. Their bioships pulsed with beautiful patterns of light, showing off technology that had impressed countless primitive species across the galaxy. Fleet Commander Vesai expected the humans to send a message of surrender within the next few minutes. Instead, something completely unexpected happened. Science Officer Kaljan stared at his instruments in disbelief. The energy readings from the human ships were climbing higher and higher, far beyond anything their intelligence reports had suggested was possible. Each human vessel was now outputting more power than most planetary defense networks. "Commander," Kaljan said, his voice trembling with worry, "the power readings from the human fleet are impossible. Each ship is generating energy levels that should require a small star to produce." Vexai looked at the tactical display. The 5 human ships looked crude and primitive compared to the elegant Zephyrian vessels, but the energy numbers did not lie. These humans were powering systems that should not exist on ships their size. "Perhaps their instruments are malfunctioning," Vexai suggested, but his skin was showing yellow patterns of uncertainty. "Continue monitoring. Surely they will see reason and surrender." On the USS Defiant, Captain Morrison was making final preparations for what he knew would be a historic battle. This was not just a fight between 2 fleets. This was humanity's first real test in the galactic arena, and the outcome would determine Earth's future for generations to come. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez monitored the alien ships from her sensor station. "Captain, the alien vessels are maintaining their circular formation. They appear to be waiting for some kind of response from us." Morrison understood what the aliens were doing. They were giving humanity one last chance to surrender peacefully. It was actually quite generous of them from their perspective. They could have simply attacked without warning, but instead they were offering terms that would allow humans to survive as a subordinate species. The problem was that humans had never been very good at being subordinate to anyone. "All weapons stations report readiness." Morrison ordered. Weapons Officer Danny Garcia checked his displays one final time. Every plasma cannon was charged to maximum power, holding magnetic bottles filled with matter heated to temperatures found in the hearts of stars. Every torpedo tube was loaded with warheads that combined the destructive power of nuclear fusion with the annihilation energy of antimatter. "All weapons ready, Captain," Garcia reported. "We can maintain this power level for approximately 30 minutes before we need to cycle the plasma generators." Morrison nodded. 30 minutes was more than enough time to destroy every alien ship in the system, assuming human weapons were as effective as their designers claimed. The Defiant had been built by people who understood that in space combat, there was no such thing as overkill. There was only kill and not kill. And not kill meant death for everyone you were trying to protect. Chief Engineer Tony Vasquez monitored the ship's power systems from his station in the engine room. The fusion reactors were running at 110% of their rated capacity, pushing the limits of what human engineering could achieve. Emergency power cells were online, backup generators were spinning, and every available system was channeling energy to the weapons arrays. Ship around them hummed with barely contained violence. The Defiant was no longer just a spaceship. It had become a weapon of war, every system focused on the single goal of destroying the enemy fleet as quickly and completely as possible. Communications. Officer Lisa Parker continued to monitor alien transmissions. The Zephyrians were still broadcasting their surrender demands, but now there was a note of impatience in their messages. They were beginning to realize that the humans were not responding as expected. "Captain, the aliens are repeating their demands for surrender," Parker reported. "They're also transmitting what appears to be a countdown. I think they're giving us a deadline to respond." Morrison looked at the countdown timer on his display. The aliens were giving humanity exactly 5 minutes to surrender or face the consequences. It was a generous offer by galactic standards, but Morrison had no intention of accepting it. The other human ships in the fleet were also preparing for battle. The USS Intrepid, commanded by Captain Susan Mitchell, had moved into position to cover the Defiant's flanks. The USS Resolute, under Captain Mark Johnson, was preparing to engage the alien ships on the far side of their formation. The USS Relentless and the USS Vengeance were positioning themselves to prevent any alien ships from escaping. Each human ship was different in design, but they all shared the same basic philosophy. They were built to fight enemies with superior technology by using superior firepower. Where other species built elegant ships that could do many things adequately, humans built ships that could do one thing perfectly: destroy whatever they were pointed at. Navigator Chris Thompson fine-tuned the Defiant's position, bringing the ship into perfect alignment for maximum weapons effectiveness. The alien fleet's circular formation meant that a single spread of torpedoes could potentially damage multiple targets, while the plasma cannons could sweep across their entire fleet. Commander Vex High was beginning to feel the first stirrings of real concern. The humans were not behaving like any primitive species the Confederation had ever encountered. Most young civilizations would have surrendered by now, overwhelmed by the obvious superiority of Confederation technology. Tactical Officer Zethmar, what is your assessment of the human fleet? Vex High asked. Zethmar was an experienced military officer who had participated in dozens of first contact missions. His skin showed deep red patterns of worry as he studied the tactical display. Commander, the human ships are positioned for attack, not defense. They appear to be preparing for combat rather than surrender. Vex High found this hard to believe. The human ships were outnumbered more than 2 to 1, and Confederation technology was thousands of years more advanced than anything these primitives could have developed. Surely they could see that resistance was futile. Perhaps they are simply inexperienced in space combat, Vex High suggested. Send them another message. Explain that resistance will result in their destruction. But even as he gave the order, Vex High was beginning to understand that something was very wrong with this first contact mission. The humans were not acting like primitives who were impressed by superior technology. They were acting like experienced warriors who were prepared to fight against overwhelming odds. On the Defiant, the countdown timer reached 2 minutes. Captain Morrison looked around his bridge at the crew who would either make history or die trying. These were volunteers who had trained for years for this moment, people who had sworn to protect Earth no matter the cost. Lieutenant Commander Kevin Hayes reported that all weapon systems were at peak readiness. The ship's point defense guns were tracking the alien vessels, ready to shoot down any incoming attacks. The main plasma arrays were charged to levels that made the deck plates vibrate with contained energy. Captain, Rodriguez said quietly, the alien countdown has reached. 1 minute. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide now. Morrison had already made his decision years ago, when he first accepted command of the Defiant. Humanity would not go quietly into the night. They would not surrender their freedom to alien overlords, no matter how advanced those aliens might be. If the galaxy wanted to see what humans were capable of, then humanity would show them. All ships, Morrison broadcast to the human fleet, prepare to engage the enemy. We will show these aliens what happens when they threaten Earth. The alien countdown reached 0. For a moment, space was perfectly quiet, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Then everything changed forever. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Captain Morrison spoke 2 words that would change the galaxy forever. Fire everything. The USS Defiant erupted like a star-going supernova. 20 plasma cannons discharged simultaneously, sending streams of superheated matter racing across space at incredible speeds. The beams were so bright, they lit up the darkness between the ships like miniature suns. 40 torpedo tubes launched their deadly cargo in perfect sequence, creating a wall of destruction that stretched across thousands of miles. The other human ships opened fire at the same moment. The USS Intrepid, USS Resolute, USS Relentless, and USS Vengeance added their own weapons to the barrage. Over 100 plasma beams and 200 torpedoes filled the space between the two fleets, more destructive power than most star systems had ever seen in one place. Fleet Commander Vex High watched in complete shock as the human fleet transformed from what appeared to be 5 primitive ships into what was effectively a mobile weapons platform of unimaginable power. The volume of fire was beyond anything in Confederation military records. Even their largest battle fleets did not carry this much concentrated firepower. Emergency evasive maneuvers. Vex High screamed, his skin flashing bright red patterns of panic. All ships, maximum emergency power to shields. But it was already too late for 3 of the Zephyrian bioships. The human weapons struck with devastating accuracy, hitting their targets before the alien crews could even begin to react. The plasma beams burned through bioshields like they were made of paper, while the torpedoes detonated with the force of small nuclear weapons. The first alien ship, the biocruiser Flowing Current, took direct hits from 6 plasma beams and 12 torpedoes. Its living hull tried desperately to heal the damage, but there was simply too much destruction happening too quickly. The ship's biosystems overloaded and began to shut down, leaving it drifting helpless in space. The second ship, Deep Ocean, managed to deflect most of the plasma fire with its shields, but 4 antimatter torpedoes found their mark. The explosions tore massive holes in the ship's hull, and atmosphere began venting into space through wounds that would have killed a living creature instantly. The third ship, Gentle Tide, was completely destroyed. 15 plasma beams struck it at exactly the same moment, overwhelming its shields and boiling away sections of its hull. When the light faded, only scattered debris remained where a proud Zephyrian warship had been just seconds before. Science Officer Kaljan stared at his instruments in disbelief. Commander, the energy output from that single barrage exceeded the total destructive capacity of our entire fleet. How is this possible from such a primitive species? Vex High did not have an answer. Everything they knew about humans was wrong. These were not primitives who could be intimidated by superior technology. These were experienced warriors who had built their ships specifically to destroy enemies with overwhelming firepower. On the Defiant, Chief Medical Officer Ellen Wright felt the ship shake as the massive weapons discharge pushed against the inertial dampeners. The vessel had been designed to handle this level of firepower, but it still stressed every system on board. Emergency lighting flickered as power systems struggled to maintain normal operations while feeding energy to the weapons arrays. "Damage report," Captain Morrison called out, his voice calm despite the chaos of battle. "Minor stress fractures." On Deck 7 and 12, reported Damage Control Officer Martha Davis. "All primary systems functioning within acceptable parameters. We can maintain this level of combat indefinitely." Morrison nodded with satisfaction. Human engineering had built the Defiant to sustain exactly this kind of punishment. The ship could keep fighting at maximum power for hours if necessary, something that would become humanity's signature advantage in space warfare. The surviving Zephyrian ships were scattering in panic, their elegant formation dissolving into chaos. None of them had ever faced an opponent who treated first contact as an opportunity for maximum violence rather than negotiation. Their bioships began evasive maneuvers, trying to escape the deadly accuracy of human weapons. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez tracked the fleeing aliens on her sensors. "Captain, 9 enemy ships are attempting to withdraw. 3 ships appear to be heavily damaged or destroyed. Do not let them escape," Morrison ordered. "All ships, pursue and engage. We need to make sure they understand the consequences of threatening Earth." The human fleet broke formation and began hunting the scattered alien ships. Each human vessel was faster and more maneuverable than the Zephyrians had expected. The aliens had built their ships for efficiency and long-range travel, while humans had built theirs for combat in the harsh environment of space. Commander Vex High found himself in an impossible situation. Half his fleet was destroyed or disabled, and the remaining ships were being hunted by human vessels that seemed designed for nothing but war. The humans were not trying to capture or negotiate. They were trying to destroy every alien ship in the system. All ships, emergency jump to hyperspace, HFY ordered. We must warn the Confederation about these humans immediately, but even escape would not be easy. The human ships had positioned themselves to block the most obvious retreat routes, forcing the aliens to scatter in different directions. It was clear that the humans had planned this battle carefully, thinking several steps ahead of their opponents. The USS Resolute, commanded by Captain Mark Johnson, caught up with the damaged bioship Deep Ocean as it tried to limp away from the battle. The alien vessel was venting atmosphere and had lost most of its shields, making it an easy target for human weapons. "This is Captain Johnson of the USS Resolute," he broadcast on all frequencies. "Surrender immediately or be destroyed." The alien crew of Deep Ocean had no choice. Their ship was dying around them, and they could see that the human vessel had enough firepower to finish them off easily. They transmitted their surrender and powered down their remaining weapons. 3 other Zephyrian ships managed to escape to hyperspace, but not before taking significant damage from pursuing human vessels. The USS Vengeance caught one alien ship at the edge of the system and crippled its hyperspace drive, forcing it to surrender as well. Within 30 minutes of the first shots being fired, the battle was over. 3 alien ships had been destroyed, 2 had been captured, and 4 had escaped with heavy damage. The human fleet had suffered no casualties and minimal damage to their vessels. Captain Morrison stood on his bridge, looking at the tactical display showing the results of humanity's first major space battle. The aliens had expected to intimidate a primitive species into submission. Instead, they had encountered a military force that had been preparing for this moment for 20 years. "Communications, send a message to Earth Command," Morrison ordered. "Tell them that the alien fleet has been defeated and that humanity has successfully defended the solar system." Communications Officer Lisa Parker began transmitting the news that would change everything. Humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy, and they had announced their presence in the most human way possible, by winning a fight against impossible odds through superior firepower and absolute refusal to surrender. Fleet Commander HFY, aboard one of the escaping ships, sent his own message to the Confederation capital. His report would describe a species that had weaponized their entire approach to space travel, building ships that existed only to destroy their enemies as quickly and completely as possible. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had arrived, and they had brought their own rules to the game. 3 months after the battle, the galaxy was a very different place. The news of humanity's victory had spread across the Galactic Confederation like wildfire, carried by the surviving Zephyrian ships and their shocking reports. Every species in known space was talking about the humans, who had destroyed half an alien fleet in their first real space battle. On the Confederation capital world of Nexus Prime, the High Council was meeting an emergency session. The Great Chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of different species, all of them trying to understand what had happened in the Sol system. The reports from Fleet Commander HFY seemed impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. Council Speaker Thalon, an ancient being whose species had been exploring space for 10,000 years, read the report aloud to the assembled delegates. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen many civilizations rise and fall, but had never encountered anything quite like humanity. The human vessels demonstrated firepower levels exceeding our most advanced battleships, Thalon read. Their weapons technology appears designed for maximum destruction rather than efficiency. Most concerning, they showed no hesitation in using lethal force as their first response to contact. In the back of the chamber, military advisor Gorath stood up to address the council. Gorath was a warrior from a species that had conquered 17 star systems before joining the Confederation peacefully. He understood warfare better than most beings in the galaxy. "Honored Council," Gorath said, his deep voice carrying across the chamber. "I have studied the tactical data from this engagement. The humans did not win through superior technology. They won through superior application of destructive force. Every human ship was built as a weapon first, with all other functions being secondary." The council chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. Most Confederation species built ships for exploration, trade, and transportation. Weapons were added as needed for defense against pirates or minor threats. The idea of building ships primarily for destruction was alien to most galactic civilizations. "Speaker." Thalen called for order. "What do you recommend, military advisor?" Gorath's expression was grim. "I recommend immediate classification of humanity as a primary military threat. Any species capable of this level of destruction in their first generation of warships will only become more dangerous as their technology advances." Back in the Sol system, Captain Jake Morrison was dealing with the aftermath of humanity's introduction to galactic politics. The USS Defiant was now the flagship of Earth's rapidly expanding space fleet, and Morrison found himself promoted to admiral without asking for the position. The captured Zephyrian ships had provided humanity with a wealth of information about galactic technology and politics. Human scientists were working around the clock to understand alien science, while diplomats prepared for the inevitable formal contact with the Confederation. Admiral Morrison stood in his new office aboard the Q Space Station Deep Space Command, looking out at the construction yards, where dozens of new human warships were being built. Each ship was larger and more heavily armed than the last, as human engineers applied lessons learned from their first space battle. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, now promoted to commander, entered his office with the daily intelligence briefing. She had been analyzing alien communications intercepts, trying to understand how the galaxy was reacting to humanity's emergence. "Admiral, we're detecting increased military activity throughout Confederation space," Rodriguez reported. "Several species are upgrading their defense fleets, and there's been a significant increase in military spending across multiple star systems." Morrison was not surprised. Humanity had announced their presence by destroying half an alien fleet in 30 minutes. Every species in the galaxy was now wondering if they could defend themselves against human weapons. "Any direct threats against Earth?" Morrison asked. "No, sir. Quite the opposite. We're receiving diplomatic messages from over 40 different species, all requesting formal treaties and trade agreements. It seems everyone wants to be friends with us now." Morrison smiled grimly. Fear was an excellent foundation for respect in galactic politics. Humanity had learned that lesson the hard way during their own violent history, and apparently it applied to interstellar relations as well. On the Confederation capital, the High Council was reaching a historic decision. After 3 months of debate, they had concluded that humanity could not be ignored or contained. The humans were too dangerous to fight and too advanced to dismiss as primitives. Council Speaker Thalen stood before the assembled delegates to announce their decision. "The High Council has voted to offer humanity immediate full membership in the Galactic Confederation, with all rights and privileges accorded to primary member species." The chamber fell silent. Primary membership was usually granted only to species with thousands of years of spacefaring history and proven peaceful intentions. Humanity had been in space for barely 20 years and had introduced themselves by winning a devastating military victory. "Furthermore," Thalen continued, "humanity will be granted exclusive territorial rights to their entire star system and will be consulted on all major military decisions affecting Confederation security." Military Advisor Gorath nodded approvingly. It was better to have these dangerous humans as allies than as enemies. Their approach to warfare was terrifying, but it might be exactly what the galaxy needed if more serious threats ever emerged. 3 weeks later, the first official Confederation delegation arrived at Earth. The delegation was led by Ambassador Keftel, a skilled diplomat who had successfully negotiated peace treaties with some of the galaxy's most difficult species. Even so, he felt nervous as his ship approached the human homeworld. Earth looked peaceful from space, mostly blue and green with white clouds swirling around it. It was hard to believe that such a beautiful world had produced a species capable of such devastating military power. Admiral Morrison met the alien delegation at the newly completed Earth Orbital Station. The meeting was broadcast live across both Earth and the Confederation, as billions of beings watched humanity's formal entry into galactic politics. Ambassador Keftel presented the Confederation's offer of membership to Morrison and the assembled human representatives. The terms were generous, almost unprecedented in galactic history. Humanity would be granted full membership rights, territorial sovereignty, and a permanent seat on the Confederation Military Council. "We are honored by the Confederation's offer," Morrison replied diplomatically. "Humanity accepts membership in the Galactic Confederation and looks forward to peaceful cooperation with all member species." The words were polite, but everyone understood the real message. Humanity was willing to be peaceful as long as everyone else was peaceful as well. But if anyone threatened Earth or human interests, they would face the same overwhelming response that had destroyed the Zephyrian fleet. Ambassador Keftel smiled and formally welcomed humanity to the galactic community. As he shook Morrison's hand, he could not help but notice the construction yards visible through the station's windows, where dozens of new human warships were taking shape. The galaxy had gained a new member species, but it had also gained a new military power that changed everything. Other species would now have to consider human reactions before making any aggressive moves. The threat of human retaliation would become a stabilizing force throughout Confederation space. 1 year later, Captain Susan Mitchell of the USS Intrepid was leading humanity's first official patrol mission beyond the solar system. Her ship and 3 others were showing the flag in distant star systems, demonstrating that Earth's protection now extended far beyond their homeworld. As they traveled between the stars, Mitchell thought about how much had changed since that first contact with the Zephyrian fleet. Humanity had gone from an unknown species to one of the most respected and feared powers in the galaxy, all because they had approached space warfare the way they approached everything else, with overwhelming force and absolute determination to protect what they valued. The galaxy was learning to live with humanity's rules now. It was a more peaceful galaxy in some ways, because no one wanted to find out what would happen if they made the humans truly angry.